Well, good afternoon to you all. It's 4 minutes past midday, and now it's time for another brilliant presentation. As you all know, this is the culminating activity for the senior year, and Leila is our next presenter. She joined Santa Fe Waldorf School in the sixth grade, although she's been a Waldorf student since kindergarten when she attended our school in Maine. She intends to attend Earlham College in Indiana and to pursue anthropology and Spanish. And today she's going to delight us with her presentation on Spirit of Corn, Land, People, and Culture. This is yours.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody, for coming. I've always loved history and culture. And this past summer, I visited Costa Rica as a part of a Spanish immersion program. We stayed with host families there and spoke mostly Spanish, as very few of them spoke English. And if they did speak English, they couldn't speak it with us. This immersed me in Costa Rica's amazing culture. Every morning, our host mom would get up early to prepare breakfast for me and my roommates, typically consisting of gallo pinto, a rice and beans dish, mango, papaya, or empanadas. There was something so lovely about the care she put into it. The dishes always tasted delicious. That is one of the few things I missed from my time there, as the food was always great. I returned to the United States a few weeks later. When it came to decide my senior project topic, my mind immediately went to food, culture, and something about Costa Rica. After considering some logistics and talking with my mentor, I decided on how culture has affected food, specifically corn, in Costa Rica, Mexico, and New Mexico. I chose this to see how corn has played a part in the cultures and cuisines of Costa Rica, Mexico, and New Mexico. These three places have also been influenced by Spanish colonization, and so I wanted to take a closer look at how this has affected their culture throughout the years. The indigenous peoples of Costa Rica were largely wiped out by the Spanish. They also lack representation and are struggling to maintain their identity because of the effects of colonization. This made it hard to find a lot of information about each of the cultures of the peoples that live there. Currently, there are 8 groups: the Maleku, Chorotega, Watare, Cabekar, Ribri, Caraba, Goyami, and the Baruca. The Baruca people have retained most of their culture as they live deep in the Talamanca Mountains, which is pretty isolated. This protected them from some of the effects of Spanish colonization. Families live in sustainable farming communities and grow corn along with rice, beans, cacao, and various fruits. The majority of the other tribes are struggling to maintain and preserve their culture, however, as the Spanish often enslaved their peoples and killed them for speaking their native tongues. Corn was very important to the Aztecs who lived in Mexico. They worshipped Huitzilopochtli, the sun god, who required a human sacrifice for him to appear every day. The sacrifices' bodies were ritually divided, then eaten with maize and salt. The absence of chili, which was a staple spice for the Aztecs, further shows that this was a ritual meal. They also honored the goddess Chalhuitleco, who protected fishermen and others who worked on the water, by scattering mumushtil, or a wreath or garland of parched corn, on the water, as if they were hailstones given to the god of water. They also worshipped Zilonen, who is also known as Chikamekotl, which means seven serpent. Zilonen means doll made of corn, who is a female aspect of the maize and the goddess of plenty. They paid homage to her during Huli Tozotli, one of the 3 festivals held that marked the harvest. There, the priestesses would designate seed corn that would be planted in the approaching season. The priests would also sacrifice children to appease her. Corn was also important to the Mayans, who came before the Aztecs. In the Book of the Mayas, there is a passage that says, "The first man was made of clay, and was destroyed in a flood. The second man, made of wood, was swept away by a great rain. Only the third man survived. He was made of maize." They saw it as something for feeding the people, and not something that was simply grown for profit, as opposed to the colonizers, who originally grew corn simply for profit, and fed it to their livestock. What type of corn one was allowed to eat was dependent on one's class. For example, Aztec warriors ate tortillas, beans, chilies, and toasted maize, and drank hot chocolate, which was occasionally flavored with maize, which only they, the nobles, were allowed to drink. A dish that everyone ate was one though similar to the modern tamale. The Aztecs would take foods from surrounding lakes, like frogs, tadpoles, and shrimp, which were then cooked in maize husks like tamales. The Aztecs' native diet shifted after the Spanish conquest led by Hernan Cortes, from heavily vegetarian with very low fat to heavily meat-based and a lot of fat. The three sisters of corn, beans, and corn, beans, and squash became corn, beans, and rice. The tortillas were no longer just corn, but also wheat, and were often served with little carnitas, a Mexican dish made of pork that literally means little meats. It is often made by simmering or braising the meat in oil until tender, and queso, which is a side dish made of melted cheese. Before this mixing happened, however, the Spaniards were not very fond of the native people's food. Bernal Diaz de Castillo, a 16th century conquistador, is said to have called the locals' numerous corn dishes as a misery of maize cakes, while the native Nahua called the Spaniards' wheat bread famine food. It took a while for these two cultures to fully mix, however. You can see this in some cookbooks published in the 1830s that describe a recipe very similar to the modern mole, made with almonds, sesame seeds, raisins, cloves, and cinnamon with dried ground chilies, very similar to recipes from Puebla and Oaxaca, but with names like mole gallego, Gallican of northwest Spain, and castellano, Castilian of central Spain. This use of language lends weight to the theory that while these mixings of culture were intentional, some of the ingredients were still seen as slightly foreign. There were also points in time where the mixing of corn into the cuisine had not yet happened, and it was viewed as food for livestock. Eventually it did spread, however, and became more popular as a food source. Moving on to the American Southwest, corn was very special to the peoples there. The peoples of New Mexico often lived together in large buildings that the Spanish called pueblos. Two of these peoples, the Zuni and the Hopi, lived in these types of buildings. They had an efficient system of growing, harvesting, and then preparing the corn. The men irrigated the fields and farmed, while the women ground and cooked the corn in a large open plaza. To prepare the corn, 3 women worked together, each with a mano and metate. A mano was a handheld stone, and the metate was used to grind the corn or grain. One of them broke the corn, the next ground it, and the third ground it again. And while they worked, they sang and removed the stones in unison. Another example is of the Zuni. They used a line of sacred cornmeal to mark out their boundaries. The Navajo have a dance specifically dedicated to corn, the Navajo corn dance. In it, women grind corn with their metates while brushing and braiding their hair. The Anasazi, and other people of the Southwest, used waffle-like gardens to plant corn, with a series of dams and ditches to direct and disperse water from the numerous flash floods that came their way. Soon after the Anasazi began farming with these waffle gardens, hunters from northwestern Canada attacked and called these farmers the Anasazi, or ancient enemy. The Zuni descendants of the Anasazi called these attackers the Apache, or enemy. Later on, when a group of wandering hunters learned from the farmers in the Pajarito Plateau, which is in the Jemez Mountains, the Pueblo people called them the Apaches of Navajo, the enemies of planted fields. Corn was so important to the Zuni that they considered it one of the 5 facts of life, along with earth, air, water, and fire. Frank Cushing, an explorer from Pennsylvania, once heard a Zuni priest say, 5 things alone are necessary to the sustenance and comfort of the dark ones among the children of earth. The sun, who is the father of all, the earth, who is the mother of men, the water, who is the grandfather, the fire, who is the grandmother, our brothers and sisters the corn, and seeds of growing things. I believe that this shows what corn meant to the Zuni. One can even see it in the Zuni creation story. In it, the Sun Father gave light and life and created Earth Mother and Sky Father. The Earth Mother then gave birth to the first men and animals, and in Sky Father's hand they were, quote-unquote, yellow grains to guide their children. Sky Father created twin boys, or warriors, who went out into the world and freed the children from the darkness by giving them a ladder to climb into the sun's light. Their parents had been afraid to let them go. They were taught the sacred words and rituals by the priest chiefs and got divided into clans. They were told to wander until they reached the quote-unquote middle of the world. Eventually, they found the place of the Misty Waters, where they met a rival clan called the Seed People. They challenged them to show their strength, and so they sang and danced, and for 8 days it rained. The Seed People then danced for 8 days, and at the end, the prayer plumes had changed into 7 corn plants. The Seed People said, "These are the severed flesh of 7 maidens, our own sisters and children." The eldest sister was yellow, the next was blue, then red, white, speckled and black, and the youngest was sweet corn. They came together and danced and formed one corn clan, and the maidens danced to beautiful corn wands. This is another example where corn played a part in the creation story of a people. The colonists came and took the corn and began to grow it for profit. However, they did use the methods that the local natives used. They eventually began to use maize as a food source. This is similar to when the Spaniards invaded Mexico to conquer the Aztecs, as at first corn was regarded as something for profit or animal feed, but eventually became more accepted as a food source as intermingling between the two cultures occurred. The Zuni and other pueblos still farm using a system like the waffle gardens. They build walls of mud that are 4 inches high to encompass small beds that are 4 feet wide by 12 to 20 feet long. They then divide them into 2 by 2 foot squares to help hold rainwater and the water they pour in. They also still plant in May, quote unquote, under a waxing moon so as to grow with the moon. And they still harvest in late September and at the beginning of October. For the Tewa, the day the summer chief takes office, he starts the cycle again by bringing the buds to life. And then the medicine men travel to the center of the village, which is sacred, to awaken the earth again. The Zuni also keep multiple strands of colored corn. They plant them in separate fields while keeping some to, quote unquote, maintain the bloodlines of their own pueblo. They also traditionally plant their corn by using planting sticks and sing to the growing plants, but there's been a massive decrease in traditional farming. The Salt River Project, SRP, which supplies water and power in Arizona, just about ended Pima farming by diverting water from the Salt River from their lands. The Pima, or Akimel Odom as they called themselves, lived by the Sonoran Desert, where descendants of the Hohokam people lived in between the Gila and Salt Rivers in central and southern Arizona. Corn is also used in the Zuni Chalico dance, celebrating the recent harvest during the winter solstice. Prayer plumes and baskets of seed and corn that have been blessed with a sprinkling of cornmeal are placed by the altar while the dancers are dancing, and prayer sticks are wrapped in corn husks. Offerings of cornmeal, among other sacred substances, are tossed into kookaburras or thrown downstream in a nearby river. And now to conclude my presentation. As I've tried to show throughout my paper, corn is important to the people of Mexico and New Mexico, but not Costa Rica as much as I originally thought. Corn has played a major part in at least 2 of their cultures, influencing and playing a part in their cuisines, mythologies, and rituals. It has not only been an important food staple to such peoples as the Baruga and the Aztecs, but it has also been a sacred element in their cultures, as evidenced by the creation myths of the Aztec and Zuni, and in rituals like the Navajo corn dance. The Zuni's use of a sacred line of cornmeal to mark their boundaries, and its place in religious ceremonies of the Aztecs. There are also a few people I'd like to thank. First and foremost, I'd like to thank my mom and dad and my whole family for being incredibly helpful and supportive during this whole process. They also bought several of my books and were very patient through everything, which I appreciate. I would also like to thank my mentor, Mira Rosofsky, an adjunct professor of food studies at NYU. We had many very helpful FaceTime calls as she lives in New York. And she helped provide a lot of new resources for me and ideas. She was also instrumental in shaping my project into something more cohesive, as I had a few ideas, but nothing very concrete when we first met. I also want to thank my academic advisor, Spina Castilla, for also helping me refine my project idea, checking in with me at various points during the year, rehearsing my project, and also just being very supportive overall. And last but not least, I'd also like to acknowledge Betty Fussell, author of the incredible book, The Story of Corn. This book was a major resource for me and was very helpful. And I made empanadas a couple nights ago, and I was going to take a time-lapse video, but it ended up not working out too well. So I just took some pictures. So I'm going to share my screen again and show you like the process and the final result, if that's okay. Or making the dough, mixing the masa. Because I made chicken empanadas, I had like tomatoes and some other like vegetables in the filling to make it more flavorful. I'm sauteing the onions and garlic here. And this is the final result. And they're actually pretty good, which I'm very happy about. And yeah, I'd like to thank everybody for coming to our presentation. And are there any questions? Ms. Barnard?
I'm curious why you chose this project.
Yeah, I really like food, and the food in Costa Rica was absolutely incredible, and it's just very different from everything I've kind of had before. And so also just the care that our host mom put into it. Like, she'd often wake up at like 4 in the morning, I swear, to like make empanadas for us or make like whatever breakfast we were having that morning. And so there's just something about that care. And also, I've always loved, like I said, history and culture. So I wanted to see if there was any way that I could combine all my interests. Free? Free?
I wanted to know what your favorite corn dish is.
I don't know. I really like empanadas. I also like arepas, which are really good.
Yes.
Yeah. I don't know if I really have a favorite one, though. But those are both really good. Thank you. Mr. Oleg? I can't hear you, I don't think. Yeah, I can't hear you.
Mr. Oleg, you're on mute.
Yeah.
I'm on what? Oh, there we go.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Is that better?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can hear you now.
Okay, thank you. Okay. Wonderful presentation. Thank you very much, Leila. I've spent time in the various areas around the Southwest myself, researching different things. I wondered, you talked about Costa Rica, the Zuni and the Navajo. Did your research also include the Hopi, or maybe you said that and I missed it?
A little bit, but mainly like the Zuni. I think I did research the Hopi some, and I saw that they also used like traditional waffle gardens, I think, like the Zuni, but my research is mainly focused on like the Zuni.
Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Lemon?
Well done, Leila. I really, really enjoyed it. I grow corn myself a lot, and I often struggle growing corn. It grows really well, but then we have these nasty little corn weevils that come through. I'm wondering, in your research, what did you hear or what did you read about their struggles in growing corn with water, pests, seed, whatever?
Yeah, I didn't really read that, see that much about like pests, but I do know, I think they were having like with flash flooding and stuff like that, they were having a lot of struggles with like water and stuff like that. And so that's actually why they built the waffle gardens, to like collect the water. And so when the flash flood did come, it would hold it and like everything wasn't washed away. And so that's really what worked for them. If that answers your question. Yeah.
Can I ask another one?
Yeah.
Because I was, when you showed the 5 varieties that they had names for, the red, the blue, the sweet, I'm wondering, did you come across in your research how those came about and what they each meant?
Yeah. I didn't, sorry. I didn't really see much about that. Anyone else? Ms. Colgate?
Hi, that was wonderful. Thank you, Leila. It was really fascinating to learn. I wondered if you had any additional comments on the ceremonies or really the ceremonies, whether for planting or harvesting or growing. And I know you dipped in on it as far as the new moon in May, but I wondered if you had any other thoughts or whether anything resonated with you when you were reading all this information.
I'm not really sure if, I just about the quote about like the first man being made of maize. I know that's not really about like a religious ceremony, but that just really fascinated me. Like how all these other first people came along, but they all like ended up perishing was the man of maize who survived. And I just found that really interesting. And I also find in the beginning, I think it was the Aztecs and the Spaniards, their opinions on each other's food was pretty funny.
Yeah. Great. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Anyone else? Mr. Ryan?
Thank you, Leila. I really enjoyed that. I love all the myths and the stories, and there's so many stories about corn and its role in the lives of so many people in Mesoamerica for thousands of years. I'm wondering, did in reading all those stories and thinking about the role of corn in their lives and how much it was revered, do you see kind of a modern food equivalent in the world today and in American society? Like, is like the hamburger kind of our, like, what would be our equivalent of corn? Could you imagine like that?
I did read a book on the story of corn by Betty Fussell, and it talked about like how corn is in literally everything. So I mean, like even in like things you wouldn't really think it'd be in, it's everywhere, and we don't often realize that. So I mean, maybe still corn, but it's not thought of in the same way. So I mean, maybe the hamburger, I don't know, but I do know that corn is still very prevalent. It just you don't realize it as much, I think.
Very nice. Yeah, I didn't think of that. That it could still be continuing in that way, but in a different way. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Mr. Otero? I can't hear you. I think you're on mute.
How about now?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, perfect. Wonderful presentation, by the way. Enjoy it thoroughly. A few minutes ago, you mentioned anecdotically how both cultures, Spanish and the native culture, were saying funny things about each other's food. Can you say anything about that?
I do know that like the Aztecs, they had a lot of corn. Corn was very special to them, and so like it was prepared in different ways, like depending on your class. But I think at first, like I said, the Spaniards didn't really enjoy the corn. There's like just too much of it, and it's like kind of the different food styles, and the native people like really didn't really think very highly of their wheat bread, and so I just found that kind of funny, and like how eventually they it became like you can see now like Tex-Mex and all that kind of cuisine, and corn enchiladas and tacos and a lot of stuff like that. But originally it was interesting for me to realize that no, there wasn't really much combination. Although they did happen later on, but there wasn't originally very much.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions?
Well done, Leila Gale.
Thank you.
So well.
Woo!